I thought that was all natural.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I thought that was Father John Paul's fan club that was just applauding there for us at the end.
They're back there.
That's nice. Well, welcome to our family talk. This has been just a great feature of the family celebrations throughout the years. We didn't necessarily do it right at the beginning, but found partway through the history of the family celebrations that these would be, really wonderful time to share with our Ewtn family. So happy to have, of course, Father Joseph and Father John Paul and Doug with us for this moment. So we gather today on the feast of Saint Therese. And as I think, Father, you mentioned in your prayer this morning, and then I think I mentioned as well in my opening remarks, just the parallels and the connections between Saint Therese and Mother Angelica. There's a lot of amazing similarities there between them. And, I think, certainly, Father John Paul, you've studied and done a lot in your time on Saint Therese. And how do you see those similarities between Mother and Saint Therese?
Well, Saint Therese is known as the little flower, but she is no little giant in the spiritual life. She is a big giant in the spiritual life. And Mother Angelica herself, just seeing some of the parallels, suffering being one, suffering that was something that was part and parcel with the life of Mother Angelica, being that she used to call suffering her constant companion. Cum panis, the word companion means to break bread with, and there is no closer way that you can get close to somebody than to break bread with somebody. Jesus offers his life for us in the Eucharist. And in Mother Angelica's life, she suffered her whole life, from a young 7-year-old girl, a father abandoning her and her mother. I think that a lot of people can relate to that. That's why so many people can relate to the teaching of Mother Angelica when they hear her, even until this day, is that they can relate to the suffering of Mother Angelica and the suffering of the little flower as well. She lived a short life. She only lived until she was 24. Mother Angelica lived until she was 91. But no doubt, Mother Angelica, there's so many similarities between that. Maybe I can do a series on that one.
No, talk to the guy on the end.
Always pitching.
Yeah.
Always pitching? Really? Okay.
So the theme that we gathered under today is this quote from Saint Therese, which is, confidence works miracles. Certainly, Mother Angelica had supreme confidence in God's providence and supreme trust that if God asked her to do a work, he would give her what she needed to accomplish and fulfill that work. Of all of us, you've been around the longest. Talk a little bit about that with Mother and that trust in providence.
One of the things that endeared people to Mother and the sisters so much was just their simple faith, that we are called to step out and we'll trust that God will provide for us. And so when I first arrived to interview for an engineering position at Ewtn, they had 2 signs in the mailroom where the sisters were working at the time. And one said, "We don't know what we're doing, but we're getting good at it."
That's in Father Pascal's office now.
Okay. And the other said, "Unless you're willing to do the ridiculous, God will not do the miraculous." Right. But people love that sentiment because for Mother, it wasn't like you have to have all the things guaranteed that for success in the future, you have to have it all together. No, you're going to have one foot in the air, one on the ground, and a queasy feeling in your stomach, but you're going to go forward with faith, trusting in his providence. And that simple faith just brought people on board to help her to make this happen with God's grace, of course. So, yeah, that's been a remarkable adventure, as you know,
Yes.
Doug and all of us have known, being associated with the network, it's really, I describe it as a wonderful adventure that strengthened my own faith. Because I've seen God's providence work over and over and over again, and that there's always been construction going on. There's always been growth, and that's a sign of something that's alive that God has been blessing.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, I've used this line before, but George Weigel wrote this wonderful biography, of course, of St. John Paul II called Witness to Hope. And it's always struck me that really maybe the best title for Mother Angelica might be, you know, Witness to Providence. Because, you know, I think her life at every stage and in every phase was a witness to God's providence, a witness to that trust in God's providence, you know. And there's that famous quote from Mother that talks about, you know, where she said, you know, I'm not scared of dying and going to heaven. What I am scared of is going before the Lord and having Him say to me, Angelica, these are all the things you did, but these are all the things you could have done had you only trusted me more.
Right.
You know, and I think that's a lesson for all of us, whether we're, you know, founders of religious orders and television networks or just going about our daily lives, isn't it?
One of my favorite books put together of Mother Angelica's live shows, just another pitch for a book, Answers Not Promises. I love the story of people, everybody used to ask Mother, how do I know God's will? How do I know God's will for my life? Now, we know God's will by doing the commandments, by keeping the commandments, by loving God, by loving neighbor. But she would often say, kind of in a twisty way back, she would say, ask me a year from now. Then I'll be able to tell you if it was God's will or not. We do the best that we can with grace to follow God, to keep His commandments. But we don't always know that it's perfectly God's will. And that in the course of God's providence, in the course of the years, that God's providence is made known to us. That's the way Mother Angelica would look at things. A lot in her life is sometimes she wouldn't know that she was doing was perfect, but she would just do it in trust,
Right.
in confidence,
Right.
with abandonment.
Right, precisely. You know, I gave a talk to a group recently and talked about Mother and this whole issue or idea of Mother's witness to providence. And, you know, one of the questions I got at the end of that was really, how do we know that we're following God's providence and not getting ahead of God's providence? You know, how do we know?
Well, I think of when Mother was looking to go global on television, and the Pan Am Sat people were there. They were saying, well, you need 5 satellites, I think, at the time to reach the whole world. And Mother said, well, we can afford 2 right now, but not 5, so let's start with that. But quickly the providence increased, and very quickly we were able to do all 5 and cover the entire globe.
We actually added another one, so it was 6.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So you remember those details, you know, better than I do. But I think Mother wasn't one who did something rash, you know, where she would rashly do something, but she had a sense, okay, we're going to have to trust in God's providence increasing, but it's not such a rash kind of thing that it could never be realized, sort of thing.
Right. So in the past at these family talks, we've taken questions from the audience. This year we did something a little different, which was that across our social media and web platforms, we invited people to submit questions in advance. So these are questions, we have a list of questions from a number of our EWTN family members around the world. And so let's just throw out a few of these questions and kind of talk about those. And you can't go anywhere now, so, you know.
I'm stuck. It's okay.
So this is not maybe a question, this person says, but more of a comment. But given the fact that this is our first family celebration in 3 years, and because of COVID and all of the issues of the pandemic, and we were so delayed in coming back here to Phoenix to be with all of you, this person wrote in and said, I just want to thank you in EWTN for being there for us during the pandemic, when the world shut down, when churches closed. This person says, and we the faithful were denied the sacraments. I have to say, the past couple of years have been the hardest of my life, and EWTN was a lifeline. I was hopeless and scared, and that's actually putting it very mildly. I was at the end of my rope, but all along, EWTN was there. You never abandoned us. And I guess as we think about this whole discussion of God's providence, you know, obviously none of us knew that we were going to be faced with this pandemic. Mother Angelica didn't know in 1980 when she founded EWTN that there would be a pandemic all those years later. But God knew. God knew that was coming. God knew that would be there. And so, you know, in a way, EWTN was created precisely for a time such as this that we have been through. And so I think, again, the sign of God's providence at work in what we do.
Yeah, Doug even mentioned that. He said, this is your time for the televised Mass, because there were many people that were tuning into the televised Mass. And thanks be to God, the network, the Friars, for the most part, were preserved from the virus, the choir too, so that we could continue to bring the televised Mass to our viewers. And I hope you remember Father John Paul and I were involved in that 10,000 roses that came. That
right.
COVID.
They remember, all right.
Yes.
Right.
So I just kind of mentioned it'd be nice to have a Mary Garden here in the chapel for Our Lady. The next day, he amped it up. He said,
Father Joseph lit a match and I threw gasoline.
There you go, right.
and we literally got 10,000 roses from other countries even.
Yeah.
And that chapel, the choir area, the St. Michael's Hall, it was filled with roses, and it brought us so much consolation and hope, and also Our Lady's intercession, because every rose we asked would be a Hail Mary, you know.
Absolutely.
People.
Yeah, one of the first nights, Father Joseph and I were down in the chapel, and I think we were just trying to do our prayers before the Blessed Sacrament and just enjoy the chapel and the colors. And at the same time, we just started bursting out laughing because we were both just so happy with joy, just to know that people are supporting us in our work, and we wanted to support you. That's what the network has been all about in its existence of 41 years, is to provide support and spiritual renewal, spiritual content for the viewers, for you all.
And
It's also, I was going to say, just thinking about a great connection with Therese, showering
right.
with shower of roses, obviously, you know, and that whole impact, right?
The more shall we say, pedestrian side of this story too, but really also a beautiful part of that story is we were contacted by one of the florists locally,
Yes.
where many of these orders were going to, and so of course in the middle of this pandemic, this small business is barely surviving. She was about to go under, and all of a sudden she started getting flooded with all of these orders for roses from all over the world. And she said, you literally saved my business with this. That and she was not Catholic, so she was wondering what was this all about. So the Holy Spirit might be at work there with her. So this was a question that someone directed to Doug. I don't know why they chose you for this one, but they said, I've been watching EWTN for decades, and I've seen how everyone has aged gracefully, gracefully, of course. But perhaps you can elaborate on some of the notable changes at EWTN over the years and how things have grown.
Well, we have new cameras, and unfortunately, they make us look older. That's one of the problems. It definitely has caused us great difficulty. Now, I think so many of the changes, I think one of the things that's great is that if you went back and looked 20 years, 25 years ago, you'd notice a lot of changes in the style, the quality, I think the diversity, in the positive sense of that word, of programming and outreach. But it was done in a way, and that was something Michael intended, and our intention was to never be disruptive, to always see everything we did as a natural evolution of our programming. And that's why Mother is so central to everything, to have her live show on there, the fact that Mother is now, we just launched the program From the Heart, Mother Angelica From the Heart, featuring her best talks that she gave during the wonderful holy hours she did in the 80s as well. And keeping some, a lot of continuity in the great hosts like a Marcus Grodi or a Father Mitch. So there's so much lack of stability and so much change in the world. You really need to have something to hold on to, and the church is what we hold on to. That's what the magisterium's for, to give us something that's a rock, and the Pope as a rock, and also to have a certain amount of continuity, but then more dynamic shows, the news and other things that are all added in, our expanded global reach, our outreach on radio, our outreach on the web, YouTube, EWTN everywhere, that concept of trying to get across to people. So, we've gotten older as we went along, but we're doing the best we can.
I'm gonna remember the camera line next time somebody says that. It's like, oh, it's just the new camera. So obviously the
That
Friars,
high def.
that high definition, yeah,
That's
exactly,
the problem.
exactly. Shows all the wrinkles. So obviously the Friars were founded to be a part of and integral to the mission of EWTN and the work of EWTN, and you're involved in the work in so many different ways, not just at the morning mass, but that's obviously your most high-profile engagement with the network. So someone wrote in and wanted to, again, not as a question, but to compliment you on how much they appreciate your homilies and how much that means to people around the world, and how much they are praying for you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
So,
one of the things that we've tried to do is just give you a beautiful liturgy, right? So
Right,
we have a
right.
beautiful choir.
Right.
We try to do everything according to the rubrics with the beautiful chants that are part of our heritage. And I think people love it. We all love it because we love something sacred. We love something where we feel like we're encountering God. And we are. That's what the liturgy is intended to do, to bring about this encounter with God and God with us.
Right. And one of the things that was attractive to this community was the liturgy and the care of the sacred vessels, the linens, the vestments, and most of all the preaching even. Sitting back and listening to Father Joseph preach even before I knew him as my brother. And I remember one time I was a diocesan seminarian, kind of discerning my call in life, whether to join the Friars. I was up in my room and my mom came down and she said, I think you should come down and listen to this homily, because he's talking about vocations. He's talking about possibly answering a call to, the Friars' way of life. And it was something that was very attractive to me, just the way that they live, the way that they express the gospel.
So do you ever think about the fact that when you're celebrating the morning mass and you're preaching, that you have what is arguably the largest congregation of a mass in the world at any given moment? No pressure on you guys, just saying.
I think
Yes,
we
I
especially at home during COVID when the chapel was empty. And we were talking right to the camera.
Yes.
And we just had a sense, like Mother did, she just really could do this, she could convey this, that she was speaking directly to the viewers. And I recently received a letter from someone who said, because I felt inspired a few days ago, I was talking about Jesus, the Good Shepherd, and with joy, he carries that lost sheep on his shoulders. And I said, there's someone out there who Jesus wants to carry you with joy on his shoulders and bring you back. And so I received a letter last week. A man did just that after decades away. So it's those sorts of things. You never know how God will use just a little inspiration during a homily, but we trust that we will preach the gospel, and in some way he's going to use it for the good of others.
Yeah, Mother Angelica had a way of being able to look into the camera. And I think she would say this, that it wasn't very natural for her at first to look into a camera, but that she had to envision in her mind's eye somebody at home, somebody sitting on a couch, somebody in a car, somebody in a hospital bed, that she wanted to talk to you. And Father Joseph and I talked a lot about this during the pandemic at the very beginning of it, and I kind of started to switch even the mindset of my preaching and even my preparation. And like you said, there was no one in the chapel, so we weren't looking at anybody in the chapel, so I started to look into the camera. And at first it was a little glaring, I mean, the camera looking back at me and not saying anything. Right. But I started to ask Mother to help me, to help me to do what you did, to look into the camera and to be able to envision, to see people out there just like you are, suffering in the world, or just living the ordinary situations of your life, and to be able to speak to you like Mother did. And I think we try and be her sons in that way.
It's beautiful. I think there's a number of questions that people sent in that really is curiosity about, the life of the friars and what is that life. I mean, so one of the questions was how many friars are there? Do all of them show up at each daily mass? And what does a normal day look like for the friars?
Normal day.
You have to be very flexible to be a Franciscan missionary, the eternal word.
There's 13 of us, 10 of us are priests, thanks be to God. And some are assigned up in Hansville at the shrine, where there's a lot of visitors who pass through there and spend a lot of time up there. They'll typically come down also to visit the network, go to a Father Mitch show, or come to a televised Mass. But we begin our day at 6 a.m. before the Blessed Sacrament exposed with our divine office. And then one of us is offering the televised Mass. Others may have the noon Mass, which is for the employees. Others may have a Mass for the sister servants who live nearby. But then we're also engaged in a variety of works. Father John Paul especially works with our employees who are there. I oversee the chapel and organizing the music, the flowers, and everything that goes on at the chapel. So we're all very active. We don't have a lot of slack time, but we're happy about that because it means it's something living, and it's demanding, but also gratifying.
That's beautiful. Thank you. And I think on behalf of our entire Ewtn family, let me say thank you for all you do for us, for all of us. Thank you. So this was a question that someone had sent in for me, which was, how well did you know Mother Angelica, and did you know her personally? And so, yes, one of the great blessings of my life was to have known Mother for so many years. I first went to Irondale and met Mother in 1988, and we sat in her office, and I was in communications in Washington, D.C. at the time, and we talked about a project there and doing something, and we sat in her office and spent a good bit of time together. And that was my first time meeting her, but a couple of years later, she was in Washington, D.C. I was hosting her for an event there, and that was really sort of where the inspiration and the kind of the invitation from her to move to Alabama came from. And so as the years went on, she and I were really blessed to be able to be together almost every day of those last 10 active years that she had at the network. It was a great joy and a blessing for me. In that time, we went through an enormous expansion. That was when we did the shortwave radio, then the satellite, the AM/FM radio. We did the international television expansion. We launched the website. We created religious catalog. All of these things that are now a large part of EWTN's apostolate. And I was really blessed to be there alongside Mother and Deacon Bill, of course, in so many of those initiatives, and to be able to really be responsible and asked by her to lead some of those initiatives. So she was an important part of my life, and a great inspiration. She just was incredible to be with, and it was incredible for me. My wife and I named our daughter Angelica, so it was just an incredible thing. And so I had the blessing to be able to kind of step into the role that I have now, with all of that time and all of that exposure to Mother, and all of the hours and hours and hours of being with her and being able to hear from her directly, her own wisdom and her own teaching. And she told me one day, said, "Well, one day I'll be gone and you'll be responsible for EWTN. And if you mess this up, I promise I'll come back and haunt you." Now, I took that as a very, very serious threat from Mother. So fortunately, haven't had that experience yet. But I will say that I do often feel her inspiration and her support, particularly in discerning at times difficult questions or different issues, particularly in the day and age that we live in. So was indeed one of the great blessings of my life to have been with her.
And you've done a remarkable job, Michael. Thank you. Thank you.
So this question was directed to Doug. It's a little better than the last one.
Oh, good.
Okay,
Oh, good.
Yeah. So I've always wanted to know, how does EWTN pick the shows and hosts for on air? Do people submit ideas? Do you do casting calls? How does that work?
We cast lots. It's very biblical. We figure we'd do it that way. First, we get the ones that Father John Paul wants to do. We put them aside. And then we focus on the ones we might consider.
There's an inside joke.
Always.
No, I mean, for us, I think, and we've talked a long time about it, I mean, in the early days especially, financially and things like that, media is very expensive. And I came out of working for 20 years in New York media. And so in doing that, we really had to be opportunistic in many of the things we did. People would come and show up at our door, the Lord would put them there, Mother would think this person would be good, like the story about the journey home. Marcus is on the show, Mother thinks, gee, we should do something with, Jeff Cavins is there, says, gee, why don't we create some kids youth show? And so much of it was those kinds of things. And so, no, we didn't have casting calls, and we couldn't afford the things that I would have, and some of us who worked elsewhere in the business would have been normally have seen. So a lot of it was done, like I said, by having people who showed up, not by error, not by mistake, but clearly because, and as many times we talk about Providence, the idea that, at a time when there was a need for something to fill, somebody would show up, or this person would be there, and it would be like, oh, this is perfect for what we want to do. And so I think as we've gone along, we've tried to refine and do, let's say, a higher level kind of production than we had done early on. We have a review committee that goes over, the Michael chairs, that we go over all the guests we're going to have on, because we know that we have a certain amount of an imprimatur, small I, and that if people see somebody show up on EWTN, they think they must be okay, I can trust them. And we take that trust very seriously and try very hard to make sure that the people we put out there and what they're saying is in line with the magisterial teachings of the church, and that as a person that you should pay attention to. And part of our mission and the mission statement is to help other Catholic apostolates out there to grow as well. And so, over the years, we've tried to move out of producing lots of programs in many ways to now trying to focus more and more on some higher end programs. I think people hopefully have seen that, whether it was Wolf in Sheep's Clothing kind of a program, the heresies we did, Speak of the Devil, which was shot in Ireland. We've got a new series on Lords coming. So some higher end productions, some more interesting things. And but we do some casting calls on some of the smaller stuff. So if you want to send those information, if you're looking to be to Father John Paul, he can take care of casting. But that's kind of how we do it, and it really is providential that things come up. We just did something recently. A couple of years ago at Napa, Mary Hassan was giving a talk on our transgender talk. We just saw that and said, we got to do something with this. This is where we are. We had already done the gender agenda a couple of years earlier. I thought we were ahead of the curve in some ways with that. And we just finished that program. It's really good. And we hope to get it and roll it out, I think, over the next month or so, because it's timely. And it really is, the whole gender idea, but what Catholics really need to know and how it impacts, as Father Spitzer talks about a lot of times, on directly contravening our faith, and we need to be aware of it.
Right, right. And we've been able to, as we've developed our European affiliates, and so, at this point, EWTN, most people aren't even aware, we have channels in Ukrainian that's based in Ukraine that has just been remarkable and has continued to stay on the air, continued to bring hope and solace to the people in Ukraine. We have an amazing director there, Father Alexander, who's been on the network several times during the Ukrainian war situation, who is a real hero in my mind, who's managing the EWTN team, saying the morning mass that's done in there and distributed in Ukraine, and doing all of those things to keep bringing a message of hope to people in that terrible, terrible situation. And then in the evenings, he's going back to his religious community to feed and care for refugees that are there on the grounds of their monastery. We have channels in Poland, we have channels in Romania, Sweden and the Nordic countries, the Netherlands and the Low Countries. We have a channel in Spain, we have Hungary. So we have all of these different channels and affiliates throughout Europe that are and have created their own language versions, their own local versions of EWTN in those countries. And so one of the things that we've been able to do is to use the expertise and use the abilities of these groups to produce some amazing documentaries, like the Ukrainian documentary, for example, that we had just at the outbreak of the war.
It was perfect. Another providential thing. We had that on the schedule. We had no idea that was coming up. We were going to air it anyway. And the Slovenians who we work with on a different project, who do these incredible recreations and dramatizations that if you've been watching some of our other documentaries, you've seen beautiful recreation of the Sacred Heart and all these other things. And really, really powerful imagery.
Right. And even on the news side, I think obviously news is a very, very important part of the overall apostolate of EWTN and what we do. And in this time, in this day and age, when we live in a post-truth society, I think the power and the importance of news, particularly Catholic news, is perhaps more significant and more important than ever. And again, being able to leverage and use the EWTN news agencies that now exist in Erbil, Iraq, which produces an Arabic language version of EWTN news content, local reporting, original language Arabic reporting. We have ACI Africa, a French, English, and Portuguese agency that's based in Kenya that does reporting from throughout the African continent. We have, the EWTN Vatican Bureau, which is the largest news organization accredited to the Holy See, more than any other secular outlet in the world. We have Así Prensa, Así Digital, our Spanish and Portuguese language news services with reporters throughout the world. You know, all of these things that we've been able to accomplish with God's providence throughout these last several years, we're able to bring all of that and share that content across all of these different platforms. So it makes what we're able to do all that much richer, much more robust, and I think much more meaningful. Let's see. So let's ask the. Well, no. Let's see. We'll save that one for. We'll save that one for later. Let's see. So this is a little bit related to what we've been talking about, and it's this person asked, so Mother Angelica had incredible faith, and it seemed like she could take the seemingly craziest ideas and just run with them. Mm-hmm. She would admit to that, absolutely. And then God would pull her through it. Does EWTN still have that kind of faith today? And how does that work now that Mother Angelica has passed? Absolutely, EWTN still has that approach. I think one of the beautiful things was that Mother Angelica sort of instilled that sense of trust and that sense of faith and that sense of reliance on Providence into the veritable DNA of EWTN. Mm-hmm. I think it's just a part of who and what EWTN is. And one of the things that certainly I've tried to be very conscious of over the years as we have grown, EWTN now in the United States is just short of 500 employees working in many, many areas around the country and doing many, many different things. And I have to be conscious at times of the fact that the vast majority of the employees of EWTN now didn't know Mother, yes, didn't work there in a time when Mother Angelica was active in the network. But they have her spirit, they understand the mission, and they are as devoted to the mission of EWTN and carrying out that mission as anyone has ever been in the 40 years of EWTN's history. And so it's important to me also to share these stories, to talk about, as we do and are very conscious of, to talk about those stories of Mother Angelica, to talk about that history, to talk about how she did what she did, because that's very, very important in making sure that sense of trust, that sense of reliance on Providence, that is baked into the organization, and that we never lose sight of that, and that continues beyond just those of us who are there now, beyond my time or Doug's or the Father's, and that continues into the next generations and the next generations who will lead EWTN and the apostolate of EWTN.
Certainly hope so.
And I think Father John Paul has really taken that on too, and staying connected with our employees in other countries even, and meeting with them virtually. Maybe talk about that, some of the things you're doing to instill that spirit of Mother.
I've been able to go down over across the pond to EWTN Vatican Bureau for almost 7 years now, and to spend time there. And it's always interesting to me to see and to encounter people that they didn't know Mother Angelica, they never met her, but they work for her, they work for the mission of EWTN, and they have the same kind of spirit that she has. Just to hear them talk and to hear them articulate what they're doing in their programming and what they're trying to live out in their spiritual life, it shows me that it's of the work of God. It shows me that the spirit, the mission of Mother Angelica, it's kind of like the leaven in the dough. The leaven is what makes the dough rise. And that shows me, I think, that it's a real charism. If something is a real charism, something that is given of the Holy Spirit, given through a foundress to an organization, that charism is going to transcend the person, is going to transcend. And so people that even work for an organization such as EWTN, we share in that charism. I think we can, I'm proud to say that I'm, one of Mother Angelica's sons, and I hope that I stay faithful to that charism that she gave us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the beautiful things as you talk to many of our employees, particularly our younger employees,
Yeah.
There's almost always some Mother Angelica story or connection in their life. Some connection of, I remember when I was a little child and my mother would make me watch Mother Angelica live, and I thought, at the time, oh, this is horrible. How can? And then over time, I really began to really fall in love with Mother, and carried that with me throughout my life. Or just more dramatic inspirations of Mother's life and how that helped someone in their career development. And it's a beautiful thing. It really is amazing. In the early days, which you were closer to than me, so we do this all the time, by the way. This is, Mother had trouble hiring Catholics to come work for her, because nobody who had any experience in television or media wanted to take a chance on this crazy nun and her idea. And so, that really is what sort of led her to go out to the construction crew and to,
Right.
hire people like Jody Copeland, who's backstage, today with us, and was employee number 1 of EWTN, who's still here today. And to bring in those people who, like Mother, really didn't know anything about television or didn't know what they were doing, but had such great faith, and those people had such great trust in Mother, and they're the ones who were the pioneers of EWTN, who began that work and continued that work. And I think it's beautiful now that what we see is people from all over the world, people of all sorts of levels of professional experience, but with real depth of faith, come to EWTN now to seek out the opportunity to be a part of EWTN. So it's sort of flipped from what it was maybe in those days when Mother Angelica first began. But the folks who come to us and who want to work for us are just incredible people, incredible people. We're very, very blessed, very blessed. So another sort of general question as we were talking about Mother. See, Mother has been gone now for 6 years. Is there a process for canonization for Mother? So as you know, the Church has a 5-year waiting period from the time of a person's death until the time that a cause can be opened for that individual, and that's kind of the way for the Church to give time for the cult and the devotion of that person to begin to build and so forth. And so Mother Angelica is now just past the 6-year mark. We have been in discussions with the Holy See, with our own diocesan bishop, with those who need to be involved in the creation of a formal, in the opening of a formal cause for Mother Angelica. And that is something that I anticipate will move forward. These things take time. It's not a quick process, and in some ways that's by design over the centuries in the Church. But we definitely are pushing forward with that and taking the steps, the first steps, to bring about the opening of a cause for Mother Angelica. So I encourage everyone to pray for that, and to pray that outcome will one day lead to Mother being declared a saint of the Church.
Be amazing.
Yes. It would be great if Rhoda Weiss, servant of God now,
Right.
and she could be canonized at the same time. Wouldn't that be a
Yes,
wonderful
that'd be
thing?
great.
But Rhoda Weiss, you may know, was instrumental in St. Therese, who appeared to the servant of God, Rhoda Weiss, and she encouraged the teenager, Rita Rizzo, to make a novena to St. Therese. And it was at the end of that novena that Mother was miraculously healed and really came to understand the love of God and wanting to give her whole life her, to God, to God. And so Rhoda's cause has progressed now that it's in Rome. It's been through the formal process there in Ohio. So we pray for her cause as well.
Right, and if you want information about that, you check the They Might Be Saints program that was done on Rhoda Wise. You
Absolutely.
can check that out as well.
Absolutely.
There's something powerful about Mother's teaching now since she's passed on, I've noticed. I remember watching her programming all throughout formation, and she became just a part of our life, a part of our charism. And the week that she died, Ewtn kind of went into Mother Angelica mode. And you may not know that we spent so long, it's like almost when Mother had her strokes, we really didn't know how long that she would be around. So we had, they called it a Mother Angelica action plan. And that folder became to be about this big. And it really was to highlight Mother Angelica's life and just to be ready for people that would come to Ewtn, the programming that we would have. And then that week, I remember listening to Mother speak. And there was something about her teaching that was more powerful than when she was alive.
Right.
And I think you could say that about St. John Paul II, Fulton J. Sheen. There's something about their teaching. If a person is in heaven, if a person is enjoying the beatific vision, of course their teaching is going to be more potent and more powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, we're going to leave it on that note, which is a great note to leave it on.